All right, guys, let's be real. Email freebies and random website banners are not cutting it anymore. Growing your email list and your bank account as a small business owner is more competitive than ever. People are not handing over their email or their hard-earned cash for something that doesn't feel valuable to them. And that's why you need Badao. And you can get 25% off your subscription with the code Elizabeth. So if you haven't heard of it yet, Badao is the ultimate software for supercharging your email list building efforts and making sure your website visitors see the right message at the right time. Badao works with all the best email marketing platforms like Flowdesk, ActiveCampaign, and Kit, you name it. And it was acquired and rebranded by Showit about 6 months ago, and I have been obsessed ever since. And honestly, if it's from Showit, you know it's going to be amazing. So here's a few ways I've been using Badao in my business so you get the picture. So showing a pop-up for a freebie only on my blog posts that are geared towards designers, displaying a coupon code to visitors right as they're leaving my site, promoting sales with the targeted pop-up for people coming from specific websites, and one of my new favorites, a feature of adding social proof pop-ups in the corner of a browser to show recent and real-time purchases or email signups. Badao makes it ridiculously easy to connect with your audience in a way that feels both personal and strategic. And seriously, I've had my mind blown by all the features like targeting new visitors differently than returning ones or popping up an offer after someone's browsed a certain number of pages. So here's the best part. Badao is offering 25% off for a limited time with the code Elizabeth. So this is the best deal you will find, and I'm so excited to share it with you because I know this will transform your business sales like it has mine. Head to elizabethmccravy.com/Badao, that's BDOW, to snag this 25% off deal. Plus, you'll find a free Badao template that I designed to help you get started. So again, save 25% with the code Elizabeth. And now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to the 300th episode of the Breakthrough Brand Podcast. So originally I was planning something else for my big episode 300. I cannot believe I've done this many episodes. It's amazing. But the timing of when episode 300 would hit on the calendar aligned with when I wanted to announce to you all that I'm pregnant with our third precious baby. So that is what we're talking about today. And although it's not a business reflections type of episode like you typically see for these, round number podcast episodes like the 100th, the 200th, 300th, this news is so significant to me and really just describes hey, what is going on in my life right now as I hit 300 episodes of this awesome journey of podcasting. So it feels really fitting and it feels funny to me for 300 episodes, third baby, 3. I don't know. I felt like there was something there. So anyway, today I'm telling you how I found out that I was pregnant with our third baby. It's a crazy story. How I told Adam, my husband, and if we're finding out the gender, birth plans and hopes. I'm talking age gaps in my kids, how I think going to 3 kids from 2 kids will really change things for us, how that'll be different. If this will be our last baby or not, if we think it will be, and then how the first trimester has been, changes having a third baby I think will make to my business and so much more. So we are just having a chit chat about all things third baby, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravy, an online educator for entrepreneurs, website designer, wife, boy mom, and your host for the Breakthrough Brand Podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want to dive deep into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a sustainable business that fits your unique lifestyle while standing out in a crowd, then you are in the right place. I created a multiple 6-figure a year business in my early 20s, and now in my 30s, I'm still running that successful multiple 6-figure a year business on just part-time hours now as a working mom. I'm here to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe that the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, website design, personal branding, mindset, time management as a busy parent, scalable and passive income, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. Okay, so I'm basically dividing this episode into different sections, and we're going to start from the beginning with me telling you guys how I found out that I was pregnant with this third baby. So I feel like no matter how you find out you're pregnant, it is so special and it's like a memory that gets stuck in your brain. It's like a core memory forever. And I very specifically remember finding out when I was pregnant with Colin and Ethan, and those are both really sweet memories. But this third baby's finding out story like tops both of those times with Colin and Ethan, which if you didn't know, if you're like newer here, I have 2 kids already. I have 2 boys. Colin's my oldest. He's 3, a few months past 3. And then Ethan, at the time of recording this, is 9 months old. So anyway, with both of them, I found out when I was home, just in the morning after taking a pregnancy test at my house. Again, those still super memorable, but this story is just more intense than that. So anyway, I actually found out at Show It Spark conference, the morning I spoke at the conference, that I was pregnant by taking a pregnancy test and seeing a positive. And yes, I know if you're thinking like, how did you hold it all together and act normal? How did you just move on with the day and do the conference? I don't know. I feel like when I think back to that conference, seriously, one of like the highlights of my business, first of all, was that conference. But I also feel like I got a master course in compartmentalizing that day. And I actually did end up telling a few people I was pregnant the next day of the conference. But that first day, the day I found out, I kept it a secret the whole day. It was just me and this baby that knew. I didn't even tell any friends. I did not tell Adam, my husband. I did not tell anyone. So let me get into the details though. So if you're like, how'd you get a pregnancy test? Okay, I'm weird. I travel with pregnancy tests sometimes. So if you're like, yeah, why did she have a pregnancy test? Did she go buy some? Like, no, I did not make a Walgreens or CVS run, but I did have in my like makeup bag 3 pregnancy tests and some ovulation tests too, just in my makeup bag. They actually been in there a while. I had them with me on my work trip with Show It that I took earlier in October. This was all happening in October, by the way. The end of October is when I found out. And anyway, I had those in my bag from then, and I had them again with me on this trip. And also, if you're picturing me traveling with like 3 really bulky pregnancy tests, I actually used the little, the brand is called Easy at Home, and you buy them on Amazon. They're really, really cheap, first of all. So, when you think about like the pregnancy tests you see in grocery stores, they're like $10 for 1 or 2 tests. These are like $10 for like 30 tests. You can buy variety packs where you get ovulation tests and pregnancy tests together, and they're really small. They are super, super sensitive, so they detect pregnancy really early, I've found. But anyway, they were not taking up much room in my makeup bag or anything like that, but they just happened to be in there, okay? So anyway, I woke up on my speaker day crazy early because of the time change and also probably being pretty nervous about speaking that day. And I had a lot of time. Like I had way more time getting ready for the day that I needed. And I just decided to take a test just for the heck of it. And I had not missed my period or anything. We were actually not trying to conceive. I just kind of felt like, you know what? I kind of feel like I could be pregnant. Maybe I could take a test. And the weird thing is, I really did. And I know it sounds like I might be making this up, but I really did have a feeling that it could be positive because I felt like I was having some very early pregnancy symptoms, which you do get to know your body, right? As you have subsequent pregnancies, you know, like a little bit like, this is a little hint that I could be pregnant. So I had a feeling it could be positive. And the feeling was so strong of me feeling like, this could be positive. It actually made me not want to take a test because I knew a positive test and that news on that particular day would obviously be very exciting and also very distracting from this conference that I'm trying to focus on. And I was like, I don't need the distraction of that right now. But then I was so curious because again, I was feeling this pull to take one. And so I kind of was like wrestling with that of like, hey, wait, if it's positive, I'm going to have this distraction. If it's not positive, it'll be fine, but I'm going to have this big distraction. If it is, like, do I take it? Do I not? Blah, blah, blah. So at first I didn't take it. I decided not to at first. But then again, I had so much time to get ready that morning. It took me like 20 minutes to get ready. And then like, I have all this time. What am I going to do with my time? I didn't want to just keep looking at my slides. So anyway, I decided to take it. So I took the test and there it was, the world's faintest line on a pregnancy test, like so faint that I actually took like some photos of it in different lighting, different angles. And the photos actually did not look positive. Like it looked like, it's just like a pregnancy test that was not positive, but worked correctly. But when I put it under like a light and really looked closely, I could see another line. So it was again, so faint. I couldn't see it on a photo, but like I could see it with my eyes with it under one of those like really bright hotel lights. So because it wasn't so blatantly obvious, part of me was like, maybe I'm not. But I just felt like I was. Like I had the moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. So I freaked out. I cried. I Googled things. I did math on due dates and kids' age gaps and all the things. And I was so excited. I kept the secret and I just lived my day. So I went from like baby researching to reviewing my slides one more time and then eating breakfast and not taking the cold medicine I'd bought because I was starting to get a cold as it was not pregnancy safe. So anyway, I spoke at the event, which was great. Truly a highlight of like my entire time as a business owner. I presented a giveaway for the company I love, the Quiz Software Interact, that afternoon. I attended the conference and went to different things. And then I went to the speaker dinner later that night. They had a special dinner like just for all the speakers on that first night of the conference, or second night of the conference rather. And hilariously, that night, I ended up telling Madison, my bookkeeper, who some of you guys know, that I thought I was pregnant because she actually asked me, like, do I think I'll have more kids? Like, how's it going with the second? And then I was like, actually, I think I'm pregnant again. And so she was like the first person that actually kind of told that I think I'm pregnant too. And at that point, I was still like, I don't know, maybe I'm not. And so I showed her the picture on my phone and we were like zooming in. She's like, no, listen, I don't think it's positive. I'm like, yeah, no, I mean, the photo doesn't really show it well. I have 2 other tests with me, so I'm going to take another one first thing when I wake up in the morning. So anyway, I finished that day. Again, so much excitement and anticipation. And the next morning, I decided to take the second test. Again, I had 3 with me, so I had 2 left. And I slept horribly that night, I think because of anticipation. So that next day though, which was the day of my Breakthrough Brand podcast meetup, which some of you guys listening were there, that was so much fun. But what do you know, that morning I took it first thing and it was very obviously positive to where my phone camera picked it up, like no doubt. So this is when I really was like, oh my gosh, like this is truly official. It's not a fluke. It is a positive pregnancy test. So that morning I did some journaling, processing what this change like means for my life and our family and sorting all that out. And I want to be really honest with this right here. Some of that was stressful to me. Like I was so thrilled beyond belief and still am. And I felt ready for a third. We wanted 3 kids, by the way, but it still felt stressful to me. And I had stress finding out and I was pregnant this time in a way I had not when I found out with Colin or Ethan. So some of the things I felt stressed about that I journaled about a little bit. I was just wondering if I'll have to have a repeat C-section, which is something we're going to talk about in this episode. But I had a C-section with my second Ethan after a vaginal delivery with Colin. And I was thinking about that, like, wait, well, I have another C-section now. I'm also scared of giving birth again and going through all that in general. I felt like I had just done that. Stress thinking about Ethan not getting to be a baby that long with having a 16-month age gap, which is what the gap will be between him and his third baby. It was also like a weird thing for me being at Spark finding out because I felt a bit of sadness thinking about how I really enjoyed speaking the day before and I would want to apply to be a speaker again the next year at the conference and would really have loved to do that. But then I realized, wait, like I actually probably won't attend the conference next year because I'll have a new baby and I like probably won't want to go even though our baby will be a few months old by then, but like I probably won't feel like going. Just lots of priority shifting. But then I also felt excited because God blessed us with a baby. And I truly believe that babies are such a blessing. Like I said, I knew I wanted 3 kids and I was scared of, but interested in a closer age gap. So that's something Adam and I had actually been having a conversation around for a while because Colin and Ethan are 2.5 years apart. And I was saying, as we thought about a third, like, let's just have another one sooner and do a closer age gap versus like waiting so long between them. I kind of felt like staying in the baby phase felt like easier in some ways, maybe. I know people with really close age gaps are probably laughing when I say that, but that was kind of what I was thinking. And I felt myself feeling that the sweet baby in my body was going to like complete our family. And I just felt so special, like this insane bond that this child and I were alone in this hotel room when I found out I was pregnant and I got to keep it a secret. And they were growing in me as this tiny little thing when I got to speak on stage at this conference and was so nervous, but so thrilled. And the speaking went so well and the baby got to be with me for that. And it just all felt really amazing. So then that day for lunch, I hosted our Breakthrough Brand podcast meetup and I continued to keep things a secret. I waited until I got home to tell Adam, which I'm going to get to in a moment. And I did that morning though, of like really feeling like it was official. I texted 2 of my girlfriends while I was at the conference because I was freaking out and I needed moral support. So I texted one of my friends, Tori, who has 3 kids. So I knew she'd have some encouragement. And then I texted another friend Kathleen, who has a 17-month age gap with her 2 kids. So I also knew she would like get that. And both of them were like great to message with as like initial people to tell this to. And that whole Spark conference, I've said this a few times, but it was such a highlight of my business journey, even without finding out I was pregnant, just for so many reasons, like that Breakthrough Brand podcast meetup and course student meetup. It was a variety of people like who are in Book.Designer or Podcast Success Blueprint, or who just listened to the podcast. And it was just such a great community meetup. Getting to hug so many of you guys in real life that I've only ever known online, hosting that breakout session where I got to speak, and I felt like that went really well. And then I got to meet Stacy Swan, who's part of my team, in person for the first time and get to hang out with her. And then obviously finding out I was pregnant. So anyway, Spark was just really special. I will never forget that conference. And Arizona has always had such a special place in my heart because I've traveled there so much to do things with Show It. I really just love it there and super enjoy it. But now it feels like even more of a special place to me. So let me continue on my notes. So I have a few notes in here that are so random, but about why I kind of felt like a little bit of intuition that I could be pregnant. So let me just tell you. So one thing, I had a breakout, like a zits when I was at the conference, which I haven't had since like being a teenager. And that made me wonder if I could be pregnant, because I know that can be a pregnancy symptom that I actually haven't had with my prior pregnancies, but I like have known that that's a thing. And that just felt so strange to me that it made me like question, and then even though we weren't trying to get pregnant, like I said, I was kind of wanting to get pregnant soon. So like that was something on my brain. And I was starting to get sick with a cold at this conference, like a bad one, and one that felt like the medicine was not helping with. And that's always been true for me, that I get sick really easy, and it's impossible for me to fight colds when I'm either pregnant or nursing. And I was actually done nursing Ethan. So I thought like, could I be pregnant? Like this cold is really coming on strong, and it feels kind of like the colds I get when I'm pregnant or breastfeeding. And per nursing Ethan, if you're curious about that, so I feel like it's helpful to other women sometimes be open about breastfeeding journeys, but I stopped nursing at 6 months because he was really preferring a bottle, which, why that happened, there's a lot of different reasons it could have, but I was mainly having to pump that whole last month of breastfeeding, and I wasn't making much milk, and it was such a hard and sad decision for me, honestly. It was quite emotional, but we were already supplementing with formula, and then we switched to exclusive formula then. And with Colin, I nursed him until he was 19 months old, and both times, so both with Ethan and Colin, I did not get my period back till I 100% stopped nursing. So that was the same thing that happened this time. It's like I had just gotten a cycle back and then got pregnant again, basically. So that was a little bit, though, kind of like things that made me be like, this could be something. So I waited to tell Adam I was pregnant till I got home from that trip, which the conference ended on the 30th of October. So I flew home the next morning on Halloween, and it was a long travel day with the time change and traffic getting home from the airport and like tons of rain, all that. So I wasn't home till like 4 or 5, like just in time for dinner and trick or treating. And when I was pregnant with Ethan, interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravy.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravy.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. Who's my second? I actually told Colin, my oldest, first. And so with this baby, I wanted to continue that trend. So At bedtime that night, when we were putting the boys down, I told Ethan during our bedtime routine that I was pregnant. And so I told him before telling any other family members. And I know he doesn't understand. He was only 7 months old at the time of telling him, but it still felt really special to have told him about the new sibling first, just like I told Colin about him first. That felt like a weird little kind of fun tradition I'd like continued on. And then after bedtime, Adam and I had plans to have drinks on the front porch and hand out candy to trick-or-treaters that kept coming by. And I didn't have any wine. I just told him I didn't feel like drinks with being sick, and he understood, so no suspicion there. And we just had like 30 minutes of talking about other things, like updating on life from the conference, and then, what was going on with him while I was gone. And then after 30 minutes or so, I just straight up said it. Like, part of me wishes I'd done it in a cute way, but I didn't. I just told him, hey, I have news. I'm pregnant. And crazy thing, he said he literally had a feeling I was going to come home from this trip and tell him that news. And I was like, you've got to be kidding. Like that, like you could not have had that feeling. Like that's crazy. But he insisted that he had actually thought about it multiple times while I was gone, that I could be pregnant. And his reasoning was that he knew I was taking pregnancy tests on my trip. And he knew I had been like tracking ovulation. I had been talking about wanting to like try to get pregnant sooner. And then he had the thought that I would wait to tell him until I'd get home because I wouldn't want to tell him over the phone. And so, yeah, he had a feeling too. We both had a feeling, which is just so interesting how that works. But he was immediately really excited. And we spent the rest of the evening just talking about that and envisioning what life is going to be like with a third baby in our family. So that was really fun. So let's keep going through my notes. I want to talk about due date things and then age gaps, and then next about finding out the gender or not. Okay. So due date things. So you really learn your body more with subsequent pregnancies. And I feel like I got a crash course in that through feeling like I was pregnant at the conference. And then again with due date things, of just realizing like to trust your body. So anyway, I calculated my own due date using due date calculators online. And then looking at everything I had tracked in the like ovulation period tracking app I was using, which I have this year started using the Flow app, and that's FLO. And I have the paid version and I absolutely love it. I think it's so well done. It's really fun. A lot of cool information in it. Anyway, so I've been tracking things really well, which helped me calculate my due date. And I got July 6th as my calculated due date. So I go to my first doctor's appointment like over a month later, right? Because it takes them a while to like actually see you. And they tell me that's wrong. And I'm actually much earlier, and my due date is July 16th based on how I'm measuring in the ultrasound. And I know that doesn't seem like a huge difference, right? Like in early pregnancy, it's like, okay, 10 days. That's not that big of a difference just in life in general. But if you think about at the end of pregnancy, when you're talking about induction, is in when we're expecting the baby to come out and all of that, 10 days makes a huge difference in like the math of when we're expecting the baby to be born. So I was like, wait, 10 days different? Like I'm 10 days early. I don't feel 10 days earlier. Like that doesn't make sense to me. So I told the midwife, like it doesn't make sense with my math, but it was how I was measuring. And since I was so unsure, actually, she ordered another ultrasound at a like special ultrasound clinic that was closer to my house. And that tech, and so this was like a few days later, the tech found that same due date of July 16th. So I went through like the next month or so thinking I was a week and a half earlier than I originally thought, which just, again, felt so off to me. So ironically, when I would tell like friends and family that I was pregnant, I often would say like, I'm 8 weeks, which I know is early to tell you, but like, I honestly think they have my due date wrong. And I think I'm more like 9.5 or 10 weeks, So that was kind of what I would always tell people. I mean, I had other things with my body to make me think it was wrong. Like when I started showing, when my nausea went away and things like that, all felt more in line with being farther along. So anyway, all that to say, literally a week ago from when I'm recording this, I was supposed to be at 10 weeks. I had another doctor's appointment with another ultrasound and a different doctor this time on this team I'm seeing. And I was measuring differently. So they changed my due date back to when I thought it was. And it felt so weird in that appointment because I went from being 10 weeks to 11 and a half weeks, just like that. So all of a sudden, like almost out of that first trimester, when I had like started to be like, okay, they're right. Like I'm earlier than I thought, and like starting to try to like really believe that and be like, oh wait, like I was right. It's actually, I'm farther along. So anyway, I'm actually sharing the news with you guys right now as I'm 14 weeks, about 14 weeks in a few days. Because originally I was planning out my podcast calendar for the first few months of the year. When I planned for this episode to air, I was like, I'll be 12 and a half weeks, perfect time to share. But now I'm sharing even later than I thought because of all these due date changing things. So let's talk age gaps now. So Colin and Ethan are 2.5 years apart almost to the day. So close to almost to the day that for Ethan's 6-month doctor appointment with our pediatrician, we did that on the same day as Colin's 3-year doctor appointment because they are literally exactly 2.5 years apart. And this new baby and Ethan will be 16 months apart, again, almost to the date. So very, very different, much closer. And with Colin and Ethan, we only had 2 in diapers for like 2 months because we potty trained Colin Colin when Ethan was 2 months old. Colin was obviously able to communicate well and walk well and get out of the car on his own and things like that at 2.5, which made things a lot easier. We could leave him in the room alone and trust that he'll be safe while we went to put Ethan down for a nap or something like that. And so this 16-month age gap is really crazy because when I did the math, it's really like if I had had a baby in the middle of between Colin and Ethan, like this is literally in the middle of like their 2 age gaps. So that just feels wild to me. I think it'll be harder in a lot of ways, but also like easier in some ways of staying like in the baby phase. Like we've already got all the baby gear out. There's a lot of stuff that like, when you're done with it, you're like, hey, I'm going to like put this in storage for real or sell it or something. But in this case, I'm like, actually, let's just put it in this closet because we're going to need it in a few months again, kind of thing. So we'll see. I'm very open to any and all advice on having close age gaps, because I do think it'll be interesting, which I'll talk more about here in a little bit. So anyway, let's talk about gender though. So are we finding out the gender or not? You might be wondering. So we actually already found out the gender through Sneak Peek. I did a clinical test. If you haven't heard of Sneak Peek, it is a blood draw that you can do at home, or there's some clinics, depending on where you live. In the Nashville area, there are a few different places that are typically like independent ultrasound clinics, but they'll do Sneak Peek there for you. And it's a blood test to determine gender that you can do at home or at a clinic. And they advertise that you can find out the gender as early as 6 weeks, which is still just so bizarre to me. But anyway, I'll be sharing the gender with everyone. I'm not someone who could just like wait and find out at birth, even with a third child. I was like, I really want to know as quickly as possible. We're probably going to wait until after the anatomy scan to like officially share the gender. But I will say, I feel like I don't want to say too much about this because if you talk too much about it, it'll like give away the gender. And I am trying to wait to share. But I actually did 2 Sneak Peek tests, like a psycho. I did one at the clinic and then one at our home. And the due date changing on me was actually part of what led me to be like, wait, I should take it again. I don't trust the first one, which again is a long story. I don't want to get into it because if I do, it'll give away what the gender is. But anyway, as much as I love Sneak Peek, I think they're a great company. It's a great product. I love finding out early. I also think if we were to have more kids, if I were ever to advise someone like one-on-one about like, hey, like, should I find out the gender at 6 weeks or not? I personally would say wait until past 12 weeks or at least 10 weeks if you're going to do Sneak Peek, or just wait until the anatomy scan or doing the non-invasive prenatal testing through your doctor to find out. Because like, if you are someone who's not going to like just immediately be like, I trust the results no matter what, it's just going to cause you more anxiety about like, is it right? Is it not? And you're just like, it's like you almost didn't even find out. So that's kind of how I felt the first time I took it. It was almost as if I didn't even find out, especially when they changed the due date on me to being even earlier. So anyway, again, longer story. Stay tuned for another episode, and I'll announce on social media as well the gender really in like a month or so, because I'm already 14 weeks. So I'll be sharing before you know it. Okay, so let's talk about birth, hopes and goals and like thoughts around birth. So I've shared both my boys' birth stories online, and I will link to those blog posts and episodes in the show notes. But Colin, my oldest, just very short version, I had a long labor, started with the goal of being unmedicated at the birth center, but I ended up not being able to give birth that way and ultimately had a 44-hour labor after an induction that was still a vaginal delivery. With Ethan, my second, I opted for a hospital with midwives from the beginning, so no birth center. And I went into labor on my own, which was like the most amazing experience. I got to labor at home unmedicated for a long time. Great experience. And great hospital laboring experience as well. I got to 8 centimeters. They realized he was breech, and they told me I had to have a C-section for there. So that's like the 1 minute version of both those birth stories. Again, I have entire episodes about that if you're curious. And that was a wild ride, right? Both those birth stories were. I've had pretty traumatic moments in both my boys' births, and lots of twists and turns in both of them. I feel like neither time it was straightforward. And even though in both of them, I did get a lot of things that were like goals and hopes, both of them had moments that were like, just like, oh gosh, like this was truly not what I wanted, not what I prayed for. Like that's just been my journey with giving birth. So anyway, it was a wild ride, and that was only 9 months ago as I'm recording this. So it still feels very recent that I gave birth. I actually, crazy enough, like when I found out I was pregnant, I felt like, hey, I'm on my postpartum fitness journey, right? I was like 7 months postpartum. So, and now I'm like back in, I was like a little bit of a postpartum journey. Now I'm back on my pregnancy fitness journey. It's interesting how close they are. It's very, very different for me compared to like how it was between Colin and Ethan with like 2.5 years between them. So anyway, I always assumed though, after giving birth to Ethan, that soon for 9 months, that I would be able to have a VBAC if I wanted to, because that's what the doctors told me when they told me I had to have a C-section. I still remember it, like when they gave me that like news, knowing I was going to be upset. They said, you'll definitely be able to have a VBAC because of the reason you're having to have a C-section being breech and you've already had a vaginal delivery. So like if you do have more kids, it's going to be a VBAC, no problem. And I did like feel like, okay, like that's helpful to me actually. As I think about having a C-section and whatever that might bring, if it may be feeling really hard and things like that. But then at my very first appointment, there was kind of a bait and switch towards the like, hey, you know, you can have a VBAC to now that midwife at the first appointment, which I see a midwife and doctor team. So I see a different person every time. But the midwife at my first appointment was honestly kind of rude and kind of scary. And she basically told me like, what? You thought you'd be able to have a VBAC? You're definitely going to have a C-section because of this close age gap. She told me that if my babies were going to be 18 months or more apart, then we could talk about a VBAC. But since they're only 16 months apart, it needs to be a repeat C-section. Also, I just realized if you don't know what a VBAC is, that stands for vaginal birth after cesarean. So all it means is like you've had a cesarean, which is a C-section, longer word for C-section. Now you're going to get to like try for a vaginal delivery or have a vaginal delivery. And there's another term called TOLAC, which is a trial of labor after cesarean, which is what they call it before you have a successful VBAC. So anyway, that was kind of what the conversation was around. And there used to be a like statement in birth really back when like a lot of us who are listening were being born, where it was like the idea was once a C-section, always a C-section. But then VBACs became more popular and more women who have had C-sections go on to have a vaginal delivery after. So at my last appointment, actually, I wanted to like have a for real conversation about a VBAC. I actually did a lot of research beforehand, which has been interesting to me because I didn't really know much about vaginal births after cesareans. Like I only knew my own experience of a C-section and all the things I learned after. VBACs was a whole new category for me. So I had another appointment and that doctor was very adamant. He was super adamant that I was a great candidate for a VBAC, but also like that I don't have to make the decision right now. He also could probably tell that I wasn't super even convinced that I wanted to try for a VBAC because there are risks both ways, right? There's risk to a repeat cesarean. There's also risk to trying for a VBAC. So anyway, I came to the appointment very educated and informed. And for those of you listening who are first-time moms especially, like I cannot emphasize enough that like you can be in the driver's seat more than it probably feels like when you're talking to your doctor or midwife or whoever when you come educated and informed. So I had a note on my phone that I very like willingly pulled out, told him, hey, I have a doc on my phone, a little on my notes app where I keep all my notes that I want to talk through with you. And I had all the reasons I thought I'm a good candidate for a VBAC based on my research. And then I had 2 specific reasons that I thought I was a bad candidate. And I laid it all out for him, like went through all of them, which if anyone's ever wanting to see that note because you're trying to like advocate for a VBAC, maybe let me know. I'm happy to send it to you. The 2 reasons I put out as a bad candidate was the close age gap of 16 months, because again, they recommend 18 months or more. And the second reason was that both of my babies have been in weird positions at birth. That's why my labor with Colin was so long. That's why, I had a literally completely breech baby with Ethan. So that can make you like wonder, like, is that same thing going to happen again? So those are my 2 reasons I was a bad candidate, but I had tons of reasons I was a good candidate. Like I'd had a prior vaginal delivery. I've maintained health in both my pregnancies and postpartums. I haven't had any complications in pregnancy, all those kinds of things and a lot more. So he and I had a great conversation about all this, and he complimented me on how knowledgeable I was and said that that alone would get me a long way with birth goals. And it honestly made our conversation about a VBAC versus repeat C-section a lot better. And so as I've like just thought about it, and I really truly don't even have a decision yet on like what I want to try for. And I do know that whatever I try for might not even be what happens. So I honestly can say though, I can come around to either. I see pros and cons of both. Like if I were to make like a list in my journal of like pros of a repeat C-section, cons of a repeat C-section, pros of trying for a VBAC, cons of it, like I have so many for each category. For me, it's not as like cut and dry as you often hear women who've had C-sections talk about of like, of course you want a VBAC. I don't actually necessarily feel that way. So I'm not sure which I'll try for, but something that's kind of like stressful to me a little bit, honestly, is I know that even if I do try for a VBAC, I could still have a C-section. That's why it's called trial of labor after cesarean before you have a successful VBAC, because it is a trial of labor. You're trying to like do the labor thing. It might not work. So anyway, I'm holding things loosely, and luckily I don't have to decide immediately. And have time to keep researching, time to keep praying about it, and time to just like keep thinking about like, hey, what do I want? As I think about this, I also think if we're going to have more children or not, that is another factor for me. But learning about VBACs and repeat cesareans have been so fascinating to me because I've always been interested in birth since becoming a mom, and even before that a little bit, but especially since becoming a mom. And C-sections was new to me. Now VBACs are new to me and very new area of study for me lately. So, you can probably find me listening to podcast episodes about that and YouTube videos and reading articles and all the things. Okay, so now let me share what I think going from 2 to 3 will be like for our family specifically. So one thing I want to say is there's a lot of content and advice out there, which I've found so helpful personally, but about going from 1 to 2, going from 2 to 3, etc., going from 0 to 1, whatever, that type of content. And I actually would love to make some podcast episodes about that. But I also think so much of it depends on your specific family, and it depends on age gaps. And it also depends on how quote unquote easy the baby is, how easy your postpartum journey is. If there are any difficulties with breastfeeding or head preferences or being in the NICU and things like that. So anyway, with all that said, when I think about our particular family, I think it will be crazier going from 2 to 3 than it was for us going from 1 to 2, but maybe, hopefully, not as hard as it was going from 0 to 1. That would be my hope. I think, at least for me and Adam, and I think it's true for a lot of people, going from 0 to 1 tends to be the hardest because it is the most shock to your life, right? You have a way you've been doing things, and now you have this human that needs you all the time, and you got to figure out how to take care of them. And it's just a huge, huge, huge shift. There's also a lot of anxiety as a first-time mom. At least I had a ton of that. You're really just worried about all the different things. And then you get more relaxed going from 1 to 2, right? But then I think going from 2 to 3, I'm oh my gosh, we're outnumbered. Even if we both are here, we are outnumbered. And if you're alone, you're really outnumbered. You're super outnumbered if you're taking care of them alone, right? Which will be our experience, my experience, especially a lot of the time. So anyway, a lot of people say that the third is easier than the first 2, but I think so much that depends on age gaps, how hard and easy the baby was, all that. I think a 16-month age gap is hard no matter how many kids you have, but I would say especially hard when you have another older one that also needs you, that you also have to take care of. As I've thought about this and me and Adam talk about it, I'm feeling ready to be prepared for this next season of life with 3 little kids, just to look different and almost expecting it to be hard and knowing that hard is not the same as bad. But I think parts of this are going to be hard and taxing and also really joyful, but also challenging. And I feel up for the challenge, I guess is the way I would phrase it. Is I know it's going to be hard. At least right now I feel up for the challenge. I'm sure some days I'll be oh my gosh, this is really, really hard. But I do feel really excited, super, super excited about having 3. But I do think it'll be a bit challenging. Open to any advice you have too on going from 2 to 3. Another thing I'll add as I talk about that here, but also going from 2 to 3, really changes stuff up for us from even a housing perspective, a car perspective. We are going to have to buy a new car because the car that I drive that fits the whole family in it, you cannot do 3 rear-facing car seats on the second row. It doesn't work. So we're going to look into, we're going to keep that car and replace Adam's car and get a bigger SUV, maybe a van. I don't know. I'm starting to do car research lately. So things like that, even within our house, Adam and I are actually going to end up combining offices. So right now we both have had our own offices. I've always had my own office, either shared with a guest room at our apartment back when I first started my business. And then now in the 2 homes we've lived in, we've had a bedroom in both homes that's been able to be my office. And now this time me and Adam are combining offices, which is a whole nother conversation. But there's things like that, right? That this is shifting some things for us to have a 3rd child that didn't necessarily happen when we went from 1 to 2. Okay, now a few more topics I want to talk about briefly. I don't even have much to say about how the first trimester has been, how we decided that we wanted another baby, will this be our last baby, and what does this mean for my business to add a 3rd? So just so you know where we're going, that's the next few things I'm going to talk about. So how the first trimester has been. It's been a mix between both my past pregnancies. So when I was pregnant with Colin, that first trimester, 0 symptoms, 0 nausea, 0 tiredness, really nothing. I've never felt pregnant the whole first trimester, which I know is such a blessing in so many ways, but it also was very anxiety inducing for me because I was constantly worried that something was wrong that whole first trimester and even later into pregnancy, really until I started showing. And then I felt okay, this is it's a real pregnancy. Everything's okay. But with Colin, no symptoms. With Ethan, it was the exact opposite. I was so nauseous all the time that whole first trimester. I even had times where I threw up, which again, so different from with Colin. I had migraines. I had really intense aversions and cravings. It was just a whole different ballgame, so different. it's so crazy too, because I think a lot of times you hear people attribute different pregnancy symptoms like nausea versus no nausea to boy versus girl. And for me, I had two boys in two like entirely different first trimesters. I will say later in pregnancy, those pregnancies tended to be more alike, but the first trimesters were just so different. So when I look at this pregnancy, and as I'm recording this, I'm about to be out of the third trimester, or out of the first trimester, not third trimester. And I feel like it's been a mix of both my past pregnancies. So like I have had some nausea, but never any vomiting. Mainly it's been nausea where it's like after I eat, I would get like full really quickly and then be like really nauseous. I also have been more tired. With Colin, I wasn't even tired. I never took a nap that whole pregnancy. I still regret that. I'm like, girlfriend, you didn't have any kids yet. You were working from home. You should have been napping, but I did not nap that whole pregnancy. With Ethan, I napped some, but I actually have found myself hilariously in this first trimester, I have just fallen asleep a few times. Like often when I do Colin's nap time, he still takes a nap some days. Some days he won't fall asleep, but I will like be doing his nap routine. I literally will fall asleep trying to get him to go to sleep. And then ironically, he won't go to sleep, but I'll leave his room. He'll just have his like, kind of free play time, or maybe he'll eventually fall asleep. And then I'll be like, okay, like if Adam's around, like please take care of Ethan, or if I'm solo with both of them, I'll have like 30 minutes and I put Ethan down for his nap. And then I'll try to nap myself. So that's been a trend for me, a lot more desire to sleep. I've probably only taken still like five to 10 naps max, but it's felt really nice. And also it's really needed. Again, I'm just falling asleep. There was one day where we were just kind of going throughout our evening and I was laying on the couch snuggling with Colin while we were watching TV, and I fell asleep. And then Adam like kindly just did not wake me up because he's the best husband ever and like tried to get through the bedtimes with the two of them without me. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of been more of like how this first trimester's been, but generally I felt good. Like I've enjoyed it. I'm showing much earlier than I have with either pregnancy. I'm right now, what am I? I'm almost, as I'm recording this, I'm almost 13 weeks. And I am like so absolutely showing already, which is just so funny. With Colin, it took me until about 18 weeks to show. With Ethan, it was earlier, but not like this intense this early. So that's been interesting. But I overall have been enjoying being pregnant. And I've felt that way with my last two pregnancies too, even though pregnancy has plenty of moments that are so taxing, hard, stressful. Your emotions are all over the place. Your body feels heavy. You're like, there's all these things that are really hard about it. I still will say like a positive review of pregnancy. I've loved being pregnant all 3 times. And so far this time too. I think it's really fun and really special and a really beautiful gift we have as women to get to be pregnant. And I love it. So anyway, I've enjoyed being pregnant this time too. And I feel like a little more sentimental even this time of like knowing that this might be our last baby, might be my last pregnancy, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. I feel like I've alluded to that so many times, but that's one of the like kind of things I'm going to answer here. But yeah, that's a bit about how the first trimester has been, kind of uneventful overall, but really great as well. Okay, so I have just some like questions you might be wondering that I kind of thought like if I were to have done a Q&A before recording this, these might have been some things people would ask. So how did you decide to have another baby? I think this is a common question. I've asked people this when I look at families that have more than 2 children of like, hey, how did you decide that you wanted to have more? And so this is a question I'm always curious about. So I thought I'd answer as well. So this is a little bit of like, we didn't situations. I've already said this wasn't planned, but also unplanned and unwanted are different. So I want to emphasize that this baby's very wanted, but we also weren't planning to have them this close together. And we had been discussing whether or not we wanted 3 since Ethan had been born. We always knew we'd love 2, Lord willing. So after we had Colin, even before we had Colin, we were like, yes, we think we'd love 2 kids if we're able to. And I always kind of thought I'd want 3 or more though. But then on days when 2 felt so hard, I'd be like, wait a minute, maybe I can only handle 2. Like, this is crazy. I don't get how people handle more kids, honestly. Like I've had that moment so many times. But ultimately, Adam and I did land on wanting 3 kids. Adam's pretty like probably just 3. I'm a little bit like, oh, I don't know, maybe more, but Adam feels pretty set on just 3. And we've been discussing this like the whole time we've had Ethan basically, but I've been like pushing for a closer age gap, and Adam's been interested in a bigger age gap. And ultimately I accidentally won that debate. For me, as the woman who's pregnant and breastfeeding, all the things, I felt like I wanted to like knock out pregnancy and breastfeeding versus having a big age gap and then kind of like be done with that season of life, so to speak, of like the pregnant and breastfeeding thing specifically. Obviously not the having little kid phase because that keeps going on. But I have been pregnant or nursing for 4 years now, slightly over 4 years. As you're listening, this is my 4th January in a row that I've been pregnant or nursing. And I only had about 3 months in the whole 4 years that I wasn't pregnant or nursing. So it's just like, this is just like the season I've been in. And I think I kind of felt like let's just stay in the season and do it and then be done. And I also think without experiencing it yet, that there are many perks to a closer age gap, like the kids being in similar seasons and things like that, which I've already talked about. I also, again, think it's harder in a lot of ways, but I think just having multiple kids is hard no matter what. So anyways, something else that I want to add as you think and pray about more kids or not, or even whether to have kids in general or not, for at least, I can only speak from my experience, right? But at least for me, I love to think about the type of family I want for us long term. Like when I think about being old enough to be a grandmother, like what I would love for our family to look like, not just right now when they're little and everything is so intense and everyone needs you so much. And when I think about like both right now, but also as I get older, and as the kids get older, I would love to have a bigger family. And I'm not someone who came from a big family. Neither is Adam. So Adam and I both just came from 2 kids. We each have one other sibling who's the same gender. And Adam's dad and mom also both just came from 2 kids. My mom also just came from 2 kids. And my dad is actually the only one in our family line really that was from a bigger family. And they had 4 kids. And I love the bigger family or big-ish family vibes. So I think hoping for, praying for the family you want long-term and what you want for your kids long-term is a good thought, knowing that so much of this is like completely outside of our control. So know that I get that even as I talk about family structures and like wanting more kids or not and all that. I've also heard people say though, that when you're done, you're done. Like, you're done. And often perhaps when you feel so uncertain about more kids or not, you probably actually do want more, but are kind of trying to talk yourself in and out of it. And I feel like that person has applied to me, that concept of like, I did not know that I was done. I was more like, some days I felt done with 2 and other days I was like, wait, I actually do want more, but I'm kind of talking myself out of it because today was really hard. So that's how I felt at first about whether or not we wanted 3. Now, for my last 2 questions, I have less to say about both of these. Will this be your last baby? So as that relates to thinking about more kids or not, when I think about 4 kids, I don't know if we'll have 4 or not. I kind of doubt we will, but I don't know that really. I feel like you can't really make a decision until you have the next one, right? So like after we have 3 and get settled into that, I feel like I'll have more of an idea, and I feel like never say never about something like that. So who knows? I do feel like I've had a lot of moments of feeling like this might be my last pregnancy, and that perhaps if we were to have another child, it would be through adoption or fostering to adopt, and maybe would be like a while down the road from right now. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on that for right now, but you never know. And I feel like your mind can change a lot as you continue having kids. Okay, so last question. What does this mean for your business, adding in a 3rd kid? So I have an episode coming in about a month, 2 months, where I'll be talking about this. So stay tuned and come back for that. That episode will be airing on February 25th. I haven't recorded it yet, but like I said, I plan out my podcast calendar a bit in advance, and that's when that one is planned. But just a short answer of it, my business isn't going anywhere, but I have been working less and less and feeling called just in this past year. Like when I look at 2024, that was like a big thing for me in 2024, right? As I've been staying home more with my kids while still running my business, while still earning multiple 6 figures in the business and paying myself that as well, which I feel so blessed by. Like my business, crazy enough, has actually done better in 2024 than it did the year before with me working less. Like it's just crazy how things like that can happen. But anyway, I know that like the call I've felt towards being home more with my kids is just going to feel even more intense, having a 3rd baby to take care of as well, and feeling more stretched thin, if we're being real, by a 3rd kid, and then also managing a business. So I do think there will be some changes, but like I said, I have a podcast episode where I'm going to be like talking about some of that specifically, but my business is not going anywhere at all. I promise. I could not close my business. I adore my business, but I am making like some small changes. And I'll talk about that on February 25th. Okay. So anyway, guys, thank you for listening all the way to the end. I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found this helpful perhaps in some way in your own life and business. And thanks for listening and supporting me and being here through the pregnancies and births and all the things. I've officially talked about all three of these kids on podcast episodes. Did a pregnancy announcement episode for Colin and Ethan as well, and shared birth stories for Colin and Ethan, and now plan to for this baby as well. So anyway, thank you for being here. And if you want to see like baby photos from like our announcement and things like that, and me sharing more on Instagram, head over there. I'm at Elizabeth McCravy, where I'll have a post and some other things as well. Okay, bye you guys. And I'll be back next week with a business related podcast episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast, friend. I appreciate you being here. That just flew by, didn't it? Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I really want to encourage you to check out my website, where you will find tons of resources to help you grow a profitable and sustainable business. Over on ElizabethMcCravy.com, you'll find things like free workbooks, guides, quizzes, lock screens, and checklists to encourage you in your business, help you grow, and give you practical solutions to many business problems. You'll also find my top business tools. Like, yes, I literally list out all the major ones for you on my website. And I even have a lot of special discounts and offers for you guys to snag as you try these products, services, and softwares. If you want to take the podcast content and make it super actionable, my resource page is here to help. So go to ElizabethMcCravy.com/tools to access everything. I hope you have fun exploring all of it over there. And if you loved this episode, leave a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening, or share with a friend. That's a great way to support the podcast, and I appreciate it so much. Thanks again so much for listening. I'll be back next week with a new episode. Bye for now.